My name is Simon Murphy. I'm the Chief Entrepreneur in Residence at the Melbourne Accelerator Program. Today, we are very fortunate to be joined by Joe Glesta, who is the founder of Climasens in the 2023 MAP cohort. Joe, maybe start off by giving us a bit of background about Climasens and what you do.
Sure. Thanks, Simon. Climasense is a climate risk analytics startup. We started with the core understanding that our climate will change and extremes will get worse. And organizations around the world don't have the data they need to make informed decisions, to plan, prepare, and respond to a future impacted by these worsening extremes. And so we set about to build software that would guide organizations in this decision-making process.
So it seems like a startup that's easy to be inspired to work on anything. I think climate related right now, we're seeing a lot of people rightfully motivated to try and solve these bigger problems. What else inspired you to start the company?
I guess a bit of a weird way to get to where I am today. I'm originally from New York City, and I grew up in a very dense urban environment. And anytime I saw a patch of green, I got excited. It led me to eventually work in New York Parks Department, and I'd work in the center of the most affluent city park, and I was just inspired by the nature in the area. And I thought, wow, this is amazing. If all cities could look like this, then we'd be in a good place. Eventually, that led me to do my master's degree trying to help cities build more like this, which then got me into this focus of, oh, wow, we're not building cities like this, and that means we're only going to make climate change worse. And so that was essentially what drove me to do this, was knowing that we need to prepare our cities in a way that would make us respond effectively to climate change.
Okay, I want to spend a bit more time delving into, I guess, your upbringing in New York City and how that's kind of impacted in the Climasens DNA. But was working for the Parks Department like what we've seen on Parks and Rec?
Yeah, a lot of that. There was a lot of just driving 40 blocks in a little go-kart just to check if a rat was there or not there. And spent a lot of time just out in the open, hanging out and seeing celebrities like Peter Dinklage and John Leguizamo just strolling around New York City.
Amazing. So you grew up in New York City. Pretty hard for us to kind of understand that. I mean, a couple of things. How has that impacted the way that, like at Climasens, how does your upbringing have an impact on the culture and the DNA, on the day-to-day operations of Climasens, and maybe how does that impact the vision?
Well, New York, as you know, is a melting pot, and I think as a New York City citizen, if you will, you're a citizen of the world. Everyone takes ownership of New York in a way by saying it's a place to be, and as a New Yorker, you feel protective of it. Once I stepped out and left to go to Australia, I realized really quickly that it was encoded in me, but it was almost this global citizen. And knowing that I kind of wanted to always have it tied to New York, setting up shop in New York with our co-founders seemed like a very practical way to basically connect into the world. Melbourne's very far removed, right? And having a team in New York helps give us a solid foundation that moves into Europe quite easily, and then the rest of the world as well. And so, yeah, New York will never leave me, but I have certainly left New York, and Melbourne is home, and I love this place. But we'll continue to build out our team in both locations because ultimately it's important to have a global presence, especially when we're talking about a global problem.
And is there any particular advantages you see with having a team distributed between Melbourne and New York City? Any similarities or key differences you see between the two cities?
Yeah, look, I'm originally from Brooklyn, and Brunswick is probably the closest thing to Brooklyn. Well, nowadays, maybe Footscray's a little bit closer. But yeah, the cities, I always compare New York and Melbourne and LA and Sydney, right? So there's a direct parallel from my line of sight in those two. The benefit of having a team over in New York means there's always a constant connection to where things are heading. Australia is almost, unfortunately, always a laggard. And so being at the forefront of the world's greatest city and having shop there, you're exposed to where the bleeding edge is. And so it's important to always have presence there.
Amazing. And how long ago was it when you started Climasens?
So the incorporation will show September 11th, 2017. But really, I would say it started in 2016. It was one line in my master's thesis at University of Melbourne. And I got so hooked on it that I either wanted to do a PhD or something with it. I didn't know what. And it took me many years to kind of get to that next level, to take it to something truly foundational. So it wasn't until 2018 that we actually really came together. But yeah, look, I'd say 2016 is when the idea popped in my head. And I'd say for my founders in the US, they were also working at that time as well.
So talk us through a little bit more about what those couple of years are like, from the ideation phase to, I'm imagining a lot of things are kind of ruminating in your head or between you and your co-founders. What were those couple of years like between thinking about it and taking action?
Extremely tough. I think any founder that's been on a journey, especially with things that are so systemic and hard to change, that even taking a bite size seems impossible. And so for us, it was first coming together as being the most important milestone, then conceiving of an idea that would be tangible enough for us to actually tackle, and then figuring out the market for that, then understanding how we build the product. And frankly, that took a couple pivots and a couple twists and turns, not all for the best, but it built a really strong determination in the team. I think really shows the character and the grit of everyone involved, because the thing about climate founders is that if you started today, it would be cool and fashionable. If you started 10 years ago, people are like, get out of here. And so, everyone's been doing this for years already. And there's just a base layer of, no, we have to do this. And so, yeah, kept moving, kept going.
So clearly, like, a lot of thought had gone into it. And then thankfully, eventually you decided to take the next step and I guess launch the company. What was the reality from launching it to what you thought it would be, maybe in those years of planning to, what was the difference between what you anticipated would happen and then the reality of launching and starting the company?
I don't think anyone really knew, to be completely honest. This is a really research-driven project. And I use the term project because that's what it started off as. It was, can we effectively do what we set out to do with the research hypothesis behind it? To make it a business is a huge change from a project. It is to look at what you say that launch looks like. How do you actually create something tangible at a global scale? And that's what the step change and the mindset change had to happen there, was go from project to product to company to getting on the rails and getting everything right. That's been a moving feast, and really that's taken 4 years.
What have been the biggest unexpected things that have happened, maybe both good and bad, since starting the company?
Well, look, I think we started I'd say we were in Techstars in 2019 in Amsterdam. And one of the most unexpected things was Shaun and I had met a couple times beforehand. Got an offer to go to Techstars Amsterdam with a pot of money. And we moved in together, having met each other twice, into an apartment in Amsterdam to do a super intense accelerator on the other side of the world. So that was incredibly challenging, fun, exciting.
Big sink or swim moment that
Yep.
obviously swam.
Well, we drowned for a little bit. We definitely drowned for a little bit, but I think we came out on top after all that was said and done. And look, we've always been a remote first team. So balancing that, how does one maintain this relationship for so long over camera has been really trialing, but also really powerful, just to show that, the team has only met once in person over 5 years, right? Yet here we are, still going, still kicking ass. And it just goes to show that, you can do it. It's very possible.
So what are like the fundamental principles that you've learned from having a pretty widely distributed team?
Do meetings that matter, right? That's the foremost. Set up a routine, stick to that routine. And then, getting your ship in order. So being operationally focused in regards to back of house, so that when it comes to meeting time, you're not diddly-daddling over the silly stuff. right? You've got to focus on the big picture and make sure that every decision counts as well. So that's important. There's still a lot to learn, I think. And as we start to grow and build a base here in Melbourne, we'll see the dynamic change. And I hope it's for the better. But I guess we'll see, because it will be a change in how we've done things.
Some interesting insights on working with a distributed team, across the world in different time zones. How do you go about improving and building on the relationships with the people that you've got in the other sides of the world? And when you add new team members, how do you find that obviously you've got to sacrifice something from not being in the office from a team building perspective? I would say is a pretty reasonable assumption. What proactive steps do you take to build like a level of camaraderie between the team when the offices are so far apart?
Look, the best thing you could do is be transparent, right? Even if it's bad. You are on a knife's edge when it comes to relationships and personalities, especially from a distance. That's why everyone says long distance doesn't work when it comes to relationships. So you've got to be intentional, but at the same time, being honest, right? And honesty is the driver behind this entire working relationship. And, any new employee that comes online, I'm giving full honesty and transparency from day one. And I think people think the integrity there is important. So, look, that's what we do. I think as a team, we're honest, transparent. There's integrity at the bottom of it. Everything is equal and as flat as possible. And people are excited to be part of something like that.
What's your idea of success for Climasens, and how has that changed since the company first started? Maybe even from when you first started thinking about the company.
It's a weird one because 5 years ago, I did like a minute, 30-second little animated video. And I shared that with one of the folks from City of Melbourne, so our pilot customers. And the idea hasn't changed. In principle, we're doing what we set out to do. The mission was global. The intent was to create a global impact. And so as many roller coaster moments as we've had, it has maintained the same. The ambition is to be in every major city in the world. The intent is to help these cities overcome the challenges that they will face over the next couple decades. And so, yeah, from my standpoint, we really have maintained to what we set out to do.
And what are some of the personal challenges that you've had to face since starting the company?
Look, every founder has had to hold a full-time job up until about 6 months ago. Shaun got to go full-time first 12 months ago because the product needed it. I only came full-time as of March this year. And so, yeah, imagine just doing a full-time startup in climate risk globally while holding a job in a pretty high office in government as well. That was challenging for me personally. And the same thing could be said for Daniel and Timon as well, working as directors in their university. There's a lot of pressure coming at you from all ways. And you do your 9 to 5, and then you sign on to do a 5 to 9. And so it's go, go, go constantly. And so burnout's real. I think everyone respects each other's space. And if you need the time, you take the time. But ultimately, yeah, that balance was extremely difficult. Now it feels like a whole world has opened up to us, that some of us are starting to go full time. It's just night and day. Yeah, and just going great.
That's great to hear. I know when we first met through the application process for MAP, one of the things I can clearly remember was this vision that you had and how easy we thought that it would be for you to attract employees and attract investors and that type of thing to people that could really kind of get behind the mission. I'm guessing when you're working on something as positive as this with the kind of impact that you want to have, you attract a lot of interesting people, whether it be mentors and advisors and people that want to help out. What are some examples of people that have reached out and helped out? And I mean, do you ever get to the point where you have kind of too many people reaching out? How do you manage those relationships and kind of keep all of the momentum going while also at the end of the day, you're running a business and you've got to make hard decisions?
Yeah, no, I mean, it's a great question. It's layered, I would say. When we put out recruitment, we had something like 350 applicants. And there I am staring down the LinkedIn page of, 50 incredible people that I would hire in a minute. I never thought I'd be faced with that problem. And it's incredible to see people who have literally spent their entire careers trying to do these incredible things, wanting to work with us and work for us. So yeah, that's quite profound. And I think the level of advice we're getting is starting to get a lot stronger and better. We're finding people who actually know their stuff, who want to support and grow a company because the mission is behind it is strong enough for them to say, look, I don't care what it is, but your mission is strong enough for me to align with what you're doing. Look, I think because we're still very early, for me to capture this momentum and effectively harness it has been difficult. I think there's definitely success in dealing with that success while building a product, while engaging customers, while raising capital is like being an octopus with two arms. So yeah, it's a struggle. I think finding the right balance is important, especially being here at MAP has helped really define the importance of what we should be doing and how we should be doing it.
I think it's always a tough question to say, what would you do differently if you had your time again? Because I think we both know at this point, a lot of what you learn comes from trial and error and the learning and the consequences that come from having to make hard decisions. But what are sort of the fundamental principles that you've learned that you hope will take you into the kind of next 2 to 5 years that maybe you didn't know as much about when you first started?
I think I know we came from a research hypothesis, which meant we had looked at everything very deep and very macro. And so we saw an entire market. We saw hundreds of papers behind it. We saw a thesis and we saw a market pull. And that was enough for us to dive deep. What we didn't have was an understanding of what the products were needed at that time. And so actually, we have pivoted the business. In fact, in 2020, we changed from Sense City, which was a climate smart IoT type system, to Climasens, knowing that we actually had to figure out what the product and the problem we were solving together would actually make income. And yeah, that's kind of when the research hat shifted from hypothetical to product focused, and that's helped define who we are and what we do more effectively, has helped us better articulate our services to customers, and has helped us build out better products ultimately. So yeah, I think knowing your customer is really the thing that we didn't know going in. We knew enough, but not enough. And so when people say customer obsessed, I get it now. I really start to understand that if you know your customer, you can build a business around what their needs are and their problems.
So where do you see Climasens in 5 years?
Well, we will have some sort of European office by then, that's for sure. We will be Australia and New York and a European office. We'll be serving at least 50 global cities around the world. And we should at least be starting to work in areas that are disadvantaged and not having data like Southeast Asia and Africa, because we need to start filling the gaps in the data so we can support communities who are at higher risk. We will be a global company. I assume we'll have at least 25 to 30 people kicking ass and taking names, and I hope a lot of them have PhDs and have worked their asses off in climate science and are getting the accolades that they deserve.
And day to day, what do you find are the most important things, whether it be related to Climasens or maybe more personal, that help keep you motivated?
Oh, it's a great question. What keeps me motivated? I think doing what I love. You know, going back to that initial 5 years ago, I had an idea, and actually, Simon, you made us do an exercise. Write an email to yourself about what you do for a year from now. And I turned to Shaun and my co-founder, and had this moment of, wow, actually, everything we set out to do 5 years ago, we've done, right? And now this is a moment where we're just doing what we love. And so, yeah, every morning I wake up energized, excited, daunted, nervous, chaotic, but still loving what I'm doing. And yeah, we're doing great things as well. So I think, yeah, I love what I do.
I have noticed that there's a lot of energy, boundless energy, I'd say, floating around the team,
Chaotic energy
around the office. Well, what were you doing before I mean, it's interesting that you say. I love to hear stories like that where there was only a certain amount of time ago where you couldn't imagine things being like what they are now. I think that's really inspiring. What was your life like before, you studied at the University of Melbourne, and when you go back even further, what were maybe some insights that you picked up from previous careers or jobs that unexpectedly you still feel resonate with you today and help you be a better founder?
Well, here's a bit of a curveball. So when I was 18, I packed up and left New York and moved to New Zealand for a year to drive tractors. I just got my driver's license the day before I left, and decided, yep, look, I'm going to go see what life's about. It just threw me in such a deep end. It was a tailspin, and I was sinking and drowning, but I clawed my way out. I built relationships. I learned how to do it, and I did the things. And by the end of it, I was drinking a meter-long beer and getting the New Zealand tradition of your 21st. And it was like, wow, okay. So turns out I'm good under pressure. I think skills like taking yourself out of your comfort zone, building new skills, going deep into the unknown, and then actually being able to do things with that is incredibly valuable as a founder. It's grit, it's resilience, it's integrity, it's the get shit done kind of attitude.
Speaking of pressure, I do remember that you briefly said that you were a cook or a chef.
I was a cook, yep.
Cook in Melbourne. Any insights you can take away from that?
Oh yeah.
And what that was like in a startup environment?
Talk about being customer obsessed. Yeah, look, I mean, everyone has seen cooking shows and things like that, and the intensity of a kitchen where things are literally on fire. You're trying to create things while you're serving them up and are running out of ingredients, and going back to that octopus with two hands, that's where you learn how to do it. But if there's one place in the world I feel most confident, it's in a kitchen. I know exactly what to do. I'm command and control, can tell people what to do, how to do it, and I'm very comfortable. And once you start to own a space and feel good in that space, it gives you the confidence to pump out great food, which is, in parallel to making your customers happy. So, yeah, lots to learn from being in the hospitality industry.
Amazing. Last question from me, a quick one. What are you most looking forward to next for Climasens?
Well, the big thing on our mind is a raise. Yeah, seed round raise for us will mean that we get to bring the team up to about 11 and tackle some incredible projects across the world. We will be going to the US and Europe in terms of a product offering over the next 3 years. 2024 will be kicking off in Europe and hitting some of those incredible cities that we all love to be in. I'm looking forward to November. We're launching our product HeatSense, and we'll be delivering that to councils and organizations across Australia in preparation for a pretty hot summer. So yeah, lots of things on the horizon for us. Exciting times, scary but thrilling.
Amazing. We can't wait to see what you do next. I'm sure the next 5 years will be hopefully turn out as good for you as what you feel like the last 5 years have. And thanks so much for sharing your story with us today.
Thanks, Simon.